Good morning, and thank you for joining us in this third session of the Data Doctor. Today, we're going to talk about parameters. I use them a lot. I hope you use them also. First, I want to show you how to create a parameter and the 3 steps involved in creating a parameter. And then we're going to take a look at a number of use cases and how you can use them different ways to accomplish your goals. First, let's talk about what a parameter is. It's the other way that users can input data into Tableau. The first way is by loading a data set. Now, parameters are a single value. A parameter can only have one value at a time. And that value is static in the sense that it doesn't change until it's manually changed by a user. And we're going to show you a couple of different ways that you manually change it, but the change has to be a manual effort by the user. The parameter value is also global. And it means it's the same throughout the entire workbook. And when the user changes that value, it changes everywhere in the workbook at the same time. Now, the important point about parameters is they don't do anything. A parameter is just a value, and it has to be used in a calculation or a filter. And it's the calculation or the filter that actually does the work, not the value of the parameter itself. First, let's take a look at how you create a parameter. Very simple data set that we're going to look at, and this is just Superstore data. That's the data that came with your copy of Tableau. And if I wanted to create a parameter on region, I could come over here and I just right-click on region, create parameter, and a box will open up, and it actually loaded the parameter already with the values that are in region. Let's take a look at what this box tells us. First of all, each parameter has a data type. This data type happens to be a string. It's text data, but the choices are, and you can create your own parameter, floating point numbers, integer numbers, strings, Boolean, date, and date time. So we're just going to leave this as a string because we've already preloaded it. We're going to get to the value when open, and when the workbook opens later, the current value in this parameter is central, and I want to add a value to this parameter, and I'm just going to type in all. So now I've got 5 values in my parameter, the 4 values in the region, and the value all. Okay. Now, the parameter itself has been set up, but you have to show the parameter. You have to have a way to change the value of the parameter, and to do that, you open up the pill and just select show parameter. And that's what we've done over here, the parameter that I created earlier. We're now showing the parameter. And finally, you have to use the parameter in a calculation or a filter. And the filter that I used in this particular example is this filter here. It's a true-false filter, and it says if the region equals the parameter value, return a true, or if the region equals all, return a true. And I've placed that here on the filter shelf, and I've set it to true. So now I've got a way of changing the parameter using this single value selection here, and the value is at east, and we can change it to south, and we can change it to central, or we can change it to all. And when we select all regions will show. When we select any single region, we only see the single region. Pretty easy to do. Now, there's a lot of other things that we can do with parameters. I want to take a look at how you'd use it in a top-end calculation. Here, I've created a different parameter. It's this parameter over here. And you can see it's an integer. The current value is set at 3. It's going to accept all values. Okay. I've got that over here. Now I'm going to use it in a filter. Now, this is just a subcategory filter. I'm going to open the filter so we can see what's going on. And I've selected on the top tab that I want to look at the top. And in the drop-down here, I selected the parameter that I want to use. That's this parameter right here. And that's all I need to do. And now I'm seeing the top 3 values based on based on profit. We can change this value here. We'll see the top 6 values. Change it back to 2. And the parameter is controlling the number of in the top end that we see the number of subcategories that we're going to see. Okay. Very often we'll get a user, they want to use the parameter, and what they'd really like to do is they like to nest 2 parameters together. What they'd like is to be able to select a value in a parameter and then have a drop down and select from that subset the next value for the subcategories to show. We can't really do that, but what you can do is you can set up a parameter, and here we've set up a parameter on category. And I want to just show you the parameter. It's a parameter that we used before. I didn't include all of this, so I've just got three values there for category, and then I've added the subcategory filter, but I've set up the subcategory as an only relevant value. So now when I select the value in the parameter, as we see here, I'm only going to see the subcategories associated with that category. Likewise, I had to have a filter, and I used a true-false filter, and this just simply says that if the category equals the parameter value, return a true. I've set that to true, so the parameter controls the category that I see, and the relevant value filter controls the subcategories within that category. Okay. Now, sometimes we'll get a question comes in, and what a user would really like to see is they'd like to see a table like we've got here, and what they'd like to be able to do is they'd like to filter out a category, but they'd like to see the total value for that category and just show the subcategories within that category. And that's possible to do. That's something that you can do with parameters, and combining 2 parameters. We're able to do exactly that. First, I wanted to create the 2 parameters. We're going to use this category parameter again. It's the same parameter we used just a second ago, and I'm going to create a subcategory parameter. And this just lists all the subcategories. Okay. And it's a string value also. Then I'm going to create a series of other calculations. First, I want the subcategory based on the category. And this just simply says if the category equals the parameter value, then list the subcategory. If it doesn't equal the subcategory, use a blank. And that's going to give us this field here. And likewise, I'm going to create a second calculation. And this one's just slightly more involved. This involves both parameters. And this is if the category equals the category parameter, and if the subcategory equals the subcategory parameter, then include the segment or a blank if it doesn't. And then I've got one more calculation in here, which is just a simple LOD to calculate the percent of total. And that's going to calculate this value over here. This is just the sum of sales divided by the total value, or in our case, that $2.2 million or $2.3 million. Now, what this would allow us to do is to come over here and select the category, and I can select office supplies here, and you can see how the value changes. But then when I open up this, I'd have to come back and select a subcategory from the full list. That's not just the categories that we see, the subcategories we see here, but it's a full list. And quite honestly, that's a little, that's not really user friendly. But we do have the option, and we've used it here, to include a parameter action here. And I've got 2 parameter actions that we've set up, one for each one of the parameters. The first one is on the category. And all this does is it says, using this sheet, which is the drill down sheet that we're using for the example here, when I select a category, when I select this category down here on the sheet, I want to change the parameter category. And then I want to keep that value when when I make the next selection. Now, I've done the same thing for the subcategory parameter. From the same sheet, if I select a subcategory, change the subcategory parameter to the value selected. Now, what that's going to allow us to do is we can come in here and we can select any one of these values, and you can see now the subcategory has changed as well as the segment has changed. And I can come in here and select, I want to see on furnishings, for example, or I want to see on technology. And we can drill down. This is usually referred to as an asymmetric drill down. I can drill down into the hierarchy. I can see the percent of total based on the category, the subcategory, and the segment for the values that I've selected, but I can also see the values for all the other categories, and I can drill up and down this way. Okay. Now, a third thing you can do, and we see this sometimes where users would like to nest a category inside, or nest a parameter inside another parameter. And once again, you can't really do that, but kind of use this hack to get the same result using parameters in a set. Now, in this one, I've got parameter that I used earlier, which is just the n for the top n. And I've got another parameter. And this is just that category parameter again, and I'm going to reuse it. And I've created a set. And the set has two elements to it. If we take a look at the set and we take a look at the condition tab on the set, and we use this box down here to actually write in the formula, this area here acts like an LOD. And an LOD has to be a aggregate. So we come in and we say, well, you read it like if the max category equals the category parameter, it's going to return a true. But you don't have to use the if statement. You just say max category equals the category parameter. And at the same time, I want a top n. So I'm going to take both of these conditions and put them in at the same time. And on the top tab, I want the top n to equal the parameter value, or the value we've got here in the parameter based on the sum of sales. And when I do that and bring it to the filter, you can see it lists the conditions here. It says I've got max category parameter, and I'm only looking at the top two. But you can see now I'm able to change either the category or the top n value, and it leaves the appearance that the parameters are nested together. But we actually did that with the set, and use the in value for the set. Okay. Now, there's a couple of other things you may have seen, and you may have used them yourself. Parameters are real useful in doing a sheet swap. I want to show you where we're headed. I've got a parameter set up here, and it's the same parameter that we've been using, where if I look here, I've got the regions, central, east, south, and west, and I've got an all parameter, an all value in the parameter. And I can come in and I can select the parameter value, and you can see the chart change. Now, when I select all, the chart changes to a map. And that's accomplished by actually a sheet swap where there's two different worksheets in this example here. Now, the first worksheet is the map that you see in front of you. It's just a very, very simple map. All I've done is create a map based on region and state, and I've got the sum of sales in there and the sum of sales by the region. And I've also got a parameter, and the parameter is written as you've seen before. We've got the individual regions, and we've also got all. And then I've got a filter. Whoops. Then I've got a filter. And this filter, what it says is if the region parameter is not equal to all, then return a true. If it is equal to all, return a false. Okay, so I want, in this case, I want to show this sheet when the region parameter is set to all. So I set this filter to false. Then I come over in my other chart, and this is just a line chart. I'm going to change this to a region so we can see it. This is just a line chart based on the region, and it shows the graph of sales by month. And you can see here that same filter is now set to true. It says, the region parameter is not equal to all, and when that is true, I want to show this chart. Well, what this chart actually is, this chart actually looks like this. It has all the regions, and I've added a second filter that filters to the region based on the parameter value. Now I'm going to show you how we make this work as a sheet swap on a new dashboard. And what we could do is we just drag the map on and drag the region on the two worksheets. And as we change the sheet, it's kind of doing what we want, but we don't want it to look like that. What we really want to do is we want to put both of those sheets in the same container. I've just dragged a container onto the dashboard, and I want to take the map and put it in the container, and I want to put the regional line chart and put it in the same container. Okay, and now we're getting very close to what we want, but what we'd like to do is make those titles completely disappear, and we can do that by hiding the title. And once we hide the title on the two charts, it looks like when we change the value here, we've also changed the chart type. But now you know we've actually done a sheet swap, and that's how you do a sheet swap. I use them quite often, recommend them quite often. Now I'd like to show you something that I really use often, because it's kind of clunky for a user to be fooling around changing parameters using drop downs in menus like we saw on some of these other charts that we did. I like to use what I call a value picker, and a value picker is just a way to change a parameter value. And we're going to make this chart here. It actually contains two different worksheets and a value picker. And this value picker, so you can see as I hover over these different labels, the charts change. Now, the first thing we have to do is create our two charts. And this chart is nothing more than sales and profit by region. And to that, we've added a true false that the subcategory equals the parameter subcategory. And that parameter is right here. It's added to the worksheet. Okay, and it's just all the subcategories. Okay. Now we're going to create a set based on that parameter also. And that set that we create, we're going to use that condition again. We're going to use the condition tab, and all we're going to do is we're going to have the max subcategory. You could use min, but the subcategory equals the subcategory parameter. And that's going to allow us to change what's in the set, and we placed the set itself on color. And I'm going to open that up so that what's in the set is colored blue and what's out of the set is colored gray. And then we need one other item in here, and that's the value picker itself. And the value picker is nothing more than a list of the subcategory names. I've set it to full width, and I just put a circle in here and added some color to it. And when we do that, the last thing we have to do on our dashboard, we bring all three sheets to the dashboard. The last thing we need to do is add a parameter action. And this parameter action is going to change the value of the parameter. It says from the worksheet value picker, that's this guy up here. When I hover over a value on the value picker, change the subcategory parameter and keep it that way. So now I can change the value of the parameter without going through dropdown. Well, those are some of the things that you can do with the parameters. And there's several use cases there. I also wanted to show you a dynamic parameter and how a dynamic parameter comes about. And to do that, I've got a very simple workbook. All I've got in this workbook is a series of, I've got category and subcategory, and I've got a date and sales. That's all that's in this workbook. And we're going to start with the workbook updated through the end of May. We haven't put June's date in here. And I want to calculate a couple of fields here. First, I want to know what the last date in this workbook is. And to do that, we're going to use this calculation. This is what's known as a table LOD. It's just a level of detail calculation. Now, and the way you'd read this is you say, I want the max date that's in the entire data set. So this calculation looks at the entire data set and comes back with the last date that it sees in the data set. And I want to set up a parameter because we're doing parameters today. And in this parameter, we're going to use all the features in the parameter. First, we're going to set it up as a date. And when the workbook opens, we want that value set to this last date that we just calculated. And we just open that up and you can see it's right here. I can have that set to the current value or I can have it set to the last date. We're going to put it in the last date. I want to load this drop-down list from a list. And when the workbook opens, I want that to come from this date field. So when the workbook opens and I update the data set, I want to reload that dropdown based on the date. And we've done that. And then I've got one other calculation in here. And this is the calculation that draws that reference line. And all this does is it says for each category, if the date equals the parameter date, then calculate the sales. So it's going to draw this line here based on the average of the three values that are on the parameter date. And you can see if I change this date, you can see that line move around. Okay, that's our workbook, and that's fine. Well, the end of the month comes along, and I now have the updated dashboard, and I've included the month of June. Okay, and you can see now I put the last date in here. The last date or the max date from our LOD expression is now June 1st. So if I take a look at the parameter, and we take a look at the parameter list, the parameter list has now been updated. It includes June. It didn't have June in before. Now it includes June 1st. Okay. The value when opened correctly found June 1st as the max date. So it looks like we're set to go. And now, if we go over to our chart, we can see that the month of June has been added dynamically. The parameter has been updated. We didn't need to go in and manually change the drop-down list. And sure enough, our parameter works and everything works the way that we would want it to do. Okay. Well, I want to thank you for your time this morning. I wanted to go over parameters. I hope you learned some more about parameters and that you use them more in your own workbooks. Play with them, have some fun with them, learn some additional things. And if you learn something new that you haven't seen today, send me a little note on that because I like to learn from you guys just like you like to learn from us. Thank you for your time.